Imagine mud under your feet. Mud that dried, cracked, and covered in dust 7,500 years ago. Look up, a mud brick wall. Further up, a ruined temple. Below that, another temple. Below that, another temple. 18 times, 18 layers. All built in the same place, all destroyed, all rebuilt. You are currently in southern Iraq, in Eridu, the city that, according to Sumerian tablets, is where the kingdom descended from heaven. But there's something strange. When the Sumerians arrived, the city already existed. Who founded it? We call them the Ubaidans. This is just the name of an excavation mound. We don't know their names, we don't know their language, we don't even know their faces. The only thing we know is that what they left behind didn't fit into school textbooks. Today, we will open 6 seals. In official history, the Sumerians are considered the first civilization of humankind.
It is written that they invented writing, the wheel, and the city. But when the Sumerians appeared on the Mesopotamian scene around 4000 BC, there was already a people living in southern Mesopotamia for 1,500 years. In 1919, British archaeologist Henry Hall found traces of this people at the Tal al-Ubaid mound south of Baghdad. The mound's name was given to the entire culture, the Ubaid culture. The Ubaids had temples, irrigation systems, and boats. They had trade networks extending to the Persian Gulf, reaching Bahrain, the coasts of Saudi Arabia, and even Oman. 1,500 years before the Sumerians. But that's not the strangest part. The truly strange thing is the figurines unearthed from the tombs. Before seeing these figurines, it's hard to understand why you hadn't even heard of this culture. It's even harder to understand after seeing them. Let's go inside. Southern Iraq, 24 kilometers southwest of the city of Nasiriyah. A broken hill rising among reeds on the edge of a swamp in the old bed of the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. Its name is Tel Abu Shahra. It is covered with broken mud bricks, fragments of clay tablets, and animal bones. According to the locals, it is a cursed place.
A hill that even foxes avoid at night. In 1947, Iraqi archaeologist Fuad Safar came here and began excavating. The upper layer was familiar, Sumerian baked bricks. But as Safar dug deeper, older structures began to emerge. Pre-Sumerian, then older, then even older. There were 18 layers of structures beneath Eridu. They were all built in the same place. They were all temples. The lowest one was a small, single-room structure around 5400 BC. The one built on top of it was from 5000 BC. The one above that was from 4500 BC, and so on. The last temple on the hill was from the Sumerian period and was dedicated to the god Enki. Enki was the god of wisdom, water, and the one who taught humanity civilization. In Sumerian mythology, Eridu was at the top of the list of ancient cities, beginning with the phrase, "kingdom descended from heaven." But the Sumerians were not yet in Mesopotamia when Eridu's first temple was built. Who built this structure? The Ubaidans, a people forgotten in Sumerian mythology.
The first temple was simple and modest. An altar, a small courtyard, mud brick walls. But the choice of location was no accident. That spot was never abandoned for the next 1,500 years. When the structure collapsed, a new one was built on top of it. The same walls, the same orientation, the same access. It was as if that point was considered sacred for some reason, and this sacredness was passed down from generation to generation. When the Sumerians arrived, they inherited this sacredness. The temple of Enki was built directly on top of the Ubaidian temple. Eridu, which the Sumerians called the place where kingship descended from heaven, was actually a city founded long before them. The question is simple. Did the Sumerians know that the place they considered the beginning of their civilization had been built by others before them? If they did, why did they forget? If they didn't know, What were they really referring to when they said the kingdom descended from the sky? The official academy is currently undergoing a gradual transition.
He speaks of it. It is said that Ubaid gradually transformed into Sumer, but the fact that all 18 layers were made at the same millimeter-precise point tells more than just a simple cultural continuity. It tells of the transmission of memory, perhaps a debt. Someone said, "This place is sacred," and for 1,500 years, no one dared to do anything else to that point. But Eridu was only the beginning. The question of who the Ubaid people really were became much more disturbing with the figures that emerged from another excavation. Between 1919 and 1923, excavations were underway at Tel al-Ubaid in the nearby city of Ur. The British archaeologist Sir Leonard Wool, who would later introduce the royal tombs of Ur to the world, was excavating the Ubaid tombs. The tombs were modest. Most contained a jar, a bracelet, a small jug. Then something different emerged from one tomb. A small figurine, about 14 centimeters long, made of baked clay, depicts a woman, or a being believed to be a woman, holding a baby in her arms. She is breastfeeding the baby. But their faces, both the women's and the baby's, had long heads.
Unusually long. Their skulls were drawn back, almost cone-shaped. Their eyes were almond-shaped and slanted, like grains of wheat. Their chins protruded forward. Their noses were pointed and narrow. Their faces were not human faces. They resembled reptilians, a face similar to a lizard's or snake's head. This figure was not unique. Dozens were found in Ur, Eridu, and Tel al-Ubaid in the same years. Figures of men, women, and children. Some standing, some sitting, some carrying weapons, some breastfeeding. All their faces were the same. Long heads, almond eyes, reptilian features. Today, some of these figures are in the British Museum, some in the Iraq Museum in Baghdad, and some in the Penn Museum in Philadelphia. Official exhibition signs describe them as stylized human figures. Exhibition descriptions probably say ritual masks, symbolic representations. But there's a problem. If these were people wearing masks, why were the babies also wearing masks? Why is a breastfeeding woman wearing a reptile mask while nursing her baby? Why is the baby shown with a mask at birth? Another problem is the small protrusions on the shoulders of these figures, scale-like reliefs. Some have a shiny substance, a kind of coating applied to their heads.
It's as if they're depicting a rough texture rather than hair. It's all deliberate, all a repetitive aesthetic. The academic world still hasn't been able to explain the function of these figures. Are they grave goods, temple figures, depictions of gods or ancestors? There's no answer. Alternative archaeology has been saying for years that these figures are not stylized, but realistic. The Ubaidians were depicting someone else, not themselves. Someone they remembered, met, or worshipped. Official science rejects this interpretation, and it may be right, because stylized art is common in human history. A statue of an Egyptian pharaoh doesn't resemble his real face, but Egyptian art changes its style in every period. The Ubaidian figures remain almost the same for 1,500 years. The same face, the same head shape, the same eyes. The same face in the same form with the same detail for 1,500 years in a row. There must be either a very strong tradition or a very strong memory to produce it. And then there's this. In Sumerian mythology, 7 wise men called Abkalu are mentioned as Enki's helpers. These wise men are neither gods nor humans. They are depicted as half fish, half human, or half bird, half human. Every depiction places the same strange cone on their heads, the same long head. It could be a coincidence. There's no answer. In the 3rd century BC, a Chaldean priest lived in Babylon. His name was Berossos. He wrote in Greek and recounted Babylonian history to the Greek-Roman world. His works are great.
It was largely lost, but fragments of it have survived to the present day in quotations by other authors. Berossos wrote, "In the first year, a being emerged from the sea. Its name was Owens. Its body was in the form of a fish, but beneath the fish was a second head, a human head, and human feet extended beneath the fish's tail. During the day, it taught people letters, numbers, geometry, agriculture, and city building. When the sun set, it returned to the sea. The next day, it came back. This continued for years. According to Berossos, after its mother, 2 more similar beings came. They all emerged from the sea. They all taught people something. They all returned to the water at night." This story was not a fabrication of the Bilis. Berossos compiled it from Sumerian Akkadian traditions thousands of years before him. In Sumerian tablets, the name of these 7 beings is given as Apkallu, sages. The Sumerians considered them messengers of Enki. Enki is the god of Eridu, the same 18-layered temple, the same city. The first sage described by Berossos, Oannes, is referred to as Una in Akkadian texts. The exact translation is Anun's light. Anu is the sky god. This is the Sumerian creation myth. The Eridu Genesis tablet was written around 1600 BC. The tablet begins, "After the gods were created, 5 cities were founded on earth. The first was Eridu. The god of wisdom came to Eridu and taught people civilization." Now let's go back in time. The Ubaid culture begins around 5500 BC. Eridu's first temple is from 5400 BC. The Sumerians appear on the scene around 4000 BC. The Eridu Genesis tablet is written around 1600 BC. Berossos lived in the 3rd century BC. For approximately 5,000 years, the same story is told. Someone from the sea taught us civilization. From whom did the Sumerians hear this? Logically, from the Ubaids, because there was no one else before them. But from whom did the Ubaids hear it? The official explanation? This is mythology. It's the habit of ancient people to attribute their own achievements to the gods. Perhaps they invoked supernatural powers because they couldn't explain complex things. But there's a detail. Disturbing. Oannes' description. A second head under a fish body.
Feet under a fishtail. This is not a depiction of a mythological creature. This is a depiction of clothing. The language used by someone wearing a diving suit or a garment suitable for a sea dweller when describing it to someone who has never seen it. About 60 meters from Berossos, the Ubaid figurines stand silently, with scales on their shoulders, cones on their heads, and almond eyes. In the dusty display cases of museums, their labels read "stylized anthropomorphic figure." The last sentence of the first tablet concludes, "Since then, no one has discovered more than what his mother taught him." Written 5,000 years ago, and still true. Now, let's leave Eridu, to the southeast, to the Persian Gulf. From there, across the Gulf to Bahrain. Then to the eastern province of Saudi Arabia. In 1968, in an area between Dhahran and Jubail, on the eastern coast of Saudi Arabia, archaeologists found strange pottery fragments in small mounds near the shore. The fragments were not local. The design, the clay, and firing technique were not unique to Saudi Arabia. These were Ubaid pottery pieces, originating 900 kilometers north of Mesopotamia. Similar fragments have been found in Bahrain, on the coast of Qatar, in the United Arab Emirates, and even in parts of Oman. This is not a minor detail. It means that 7,000 to 1,000 years ago, the Bulai people operated an active maritime network in the Persian Gulf. They were the first known open sea seafarers. So what were their ships? A small clay model was found in excavations at Eridu. It was a small one, about 10 centimeters long. This is a model of a sailing boat. It has a hole for the mast inside. There are notches on the side for attaching the sail. This is the oldest known model of a sailing ship in the world. Around 5500 BC, 4,000 years before the Egyptian pharaohs, 5,000 years before the Phoenicians, 6,500 years before the Vikings, the Ubaites knew how to sail.
They smeared bitumen, Mesopotamia's abundant natural asphalt, on the bottoms of their ships to make them waterproof. This technique reappears years later in the Noah's Ark account. You would tar the ship inside and out. The shells, whale teeth, and coral fragments found on the Ubaid bitumen layers show that the ship sailed not only in the Gulf, but also on the open sea. Now the question is, how did these people, with stone tools and mud brick technology, engage in open sea shipping 1,500 years before the Sumerians?
The official answer is necessity. There was no copper, no salt, no agate in Mesopotamia. These had to be obtained from elsewhere. Necessity is the mother of invention. But open sea navigation, knowledge of the stars, winds, currents, and the technology to make ships watertight don't just arise from necessity. They require knowledge. They require accumulation. Where did this knowledge come from? The Sumerians had the answer ready. The Apkalus taught them. The 7 wise men. Those who emerged from the sea. The Academy's answer is still being sought. One more detail. In Bahrain, directly above the layers where the Ubaid pottery was unearthed, a culture called Dilmun begins. In Sumerian mythology, Dilmun is referred to as the land of the immortals, the paradise of the gods. Utnashtim, the only human survivor of the Sumerian flood, is taken to Dilmun and attains immortality there. Today, the largest ancient burial ground in the world is located on the island of Bahrain. 170,000 tumuli. No one knows who is buried there. The Sumerians called it the place of the gods. Bahrainis still call it the field of the dead. And the Ubaid pottery lies silently in the layer beneath this burial ground. Now, let's turn back to the north. Tepe Gavra is a small mound on the banks of the Tigris River, 700 kilometers north of Eridu and 25 kilometers southeast of the present-day city of Mosul. Its name means Big Hill in Kurdish. This mound was excavated by the University of Philadelphia between 1927 and 1938. 26 building layers were found. At the bottom was the Halaf culture, a pre-Ubaid culture of northern Mesopotamia. The upper layers belong to the Ubaid and later periods. Layers 13 and 12 of Tepe Gavra, dating from approximately 4500 to 4000 BC, contain something surprising: a small but well-organized temple complex. 3 temples arranged around a single courtyard. Each temple had its own inner chamber. What was unexpected here was the positioning of the temple doors. The doors of the 3 temples faced the center of a triangle. There was no altar in the center of the courtyard, only an open space. It was as if the 3 temples served not each other, but a central point, an unseen center. This reflects the polytheistic order prevalent in Mesopotamia, which established independent temples. Each god has its own temple, its own orientation, its own geometry. At Tepe Gavra, there was something different. 3 temples pointed to a single point. This is a rare structure in paleoarchaeology. Archaeologists called them the Trinity Temples. They couldn't decipher its meaning. There was something else found at Tepe Gavra: seals, small stone cylinders with figures engraved on them, seals that left marks as they rolled onto clay tablets. Some of these seals are abstract: stars, circles, geometric forms. Some are figurative: half fish, half human beings, long-headed figures, winged people. One seal has 7 figures lined up side by side, all wearing cone-shaped headdresses, all holding some kind of staff in their hands. The Apkalus, the 7 sages. 3,000 years before Berossos, Tepe Gavra. It was already engraved on a seal of Gavra. Tepe Gavra also surprised with another detail. In one of the layers, the tomb of a small child was found. The tomb was rich: gold beads, an agate necklace, copper tools. The child's skull was elongated, deliberately deformed.
shaped from infancy with tightly wrapped cloths. This practice is seen in many cultures around the world, from Egyptian pharaohs to Mayan nobles, from the Paracas culture in the Andes to the Huns. It was generally applied among the elites. It was seen as a sign of aristocracy. But the skull at Tepegaru is one of the oldest known examples of skull deformation in the world. Who was this child? Why was his head shaped? To which lineage did he belong? There are no answers.
The three temples of Tepegavra were destroyed around 3500 BC. We don't know who destroyed them or why. Something else was built on top of them. A more ordinary, more Sumerian-style structure. The trilogy ended. As if something had been covered up. As if a memory had been erased. Our last stop is perhaps the most unsettling. The year was 1937. Excavations were underway at another mound south of Tel El Ubaid, called Tello, the site of the ancient Sumerian city of Girsu. French archaeologist André Perrault descended into the Ubaid layers. Tombs were opened. In some of the tombs, the skulls of the buried individuals were unusually long. Not Sumerian, not Akkadian, not from later Semitic peoples. The skulls looked older, more foreign. At first, these were thought to be examples of a normal skull deformation. When anthropologists looked closer, they noticed something. Some skulls showed no signs of deformation. That is, they were not banded, compressed, or shaped. They were naturally long. This is a biological anomaly. In an adult human skull, the frontal, parietal, and occipital bones fuse together at a certain age. If there is no external banding pressure, the skull takes its natural shape. In some individuals at Tello, this natural shape differed from that of contemporary humans. Anthropologist Atri Valoui prepared a report on this finding in 1939. In the report, he mentioned two possibilities. Either these individuals possessed an extremely rare genetic variation, or the banding was done in infancy and the trace subsequently disappeared completely. The report quietly faded into the archives. World War I broke out. Excavations ceased. The subject was forgotten. In the 1990s, some researchers rediscovered Valoui's report. Some of the skulls from Tello are now in the Louvre, some in Baghdad. Some were lost in the 2003 Iraq War. They were among those recovered from looted museums. Today, their numbers are dwindling. The number of specimens available for study is limited. There is another detail in Sumerian mythology, the list of the first kings. This list, the Sumerian king list, is a tablet compiled in the 21st century BC. The list has two sections, pre-flood kings and post-flood kings. Post-flood kings reign for normal numbers, 30 years, 40 years, 60 years, ordinary figures. Pre-flood kings are different. The first king on the list, Ululim, reigned for 28,800 years. The second for 36,000 years. The third is 43,000 years. The total of the list is over 240,000 years. The vast majority of Sumerologists say these numbers are symbolic, mythological exaggeration, numbers linked to astrological cycles, or perhaps simply an expression of prestige. But the capital of these kings, according to the Sumerian king list, was Eridu. The first line of the list reads, "When the kingdom descended from the sky, it was in Eridu." The same Eridu, the same 18-tiered temple, the same city. Now, let's put all the pieces together. There was a people who founded Eridu 1,500 years before the Sumerians. In the figurines of this people, there were beings with long heads, almond eyes, and reptilian faces. In the graves of the people, some individuals had naturally elongated skulls. This people went out to sea and traveled to Bahrain. The Sumerians owed their civilization to 7 wise men who came from the sea. We see these 7 wise men on the Eridu seals, wearing cone-shaped headdresses. It is said that the first king of the Sumerian royal order ruled Eridu for 28,800 years. There is no answer. Perhaps it is symbolic, perhaps an exaggeration, perhaps a coincidence, perhaps the construction of all 18 layers in the same place is simply a religious tradition, nothing else. Perhaps the figures are stylized art. Perhaps the Awanis are mythological metaphors.
Perhaps all the long skulls were taped and their traces have disappeared. But one thing is certain. The Ubaid dynasty silently disappeared from history. The Sumerians forgot them, or pretended to forget them. The Academy labeled them as a transitional period and shelved them.
Museum signs mark them as stylized and close them off, but Eridu still stands. All 18 layers are still there. The reptilian-faced figurines still sit in the display cases of museums. In Bahrain, 170,000 tombs are still being counted. Many of the long skulls from Tel Aki are missing, but some are still waiting in vaults. Who will ask the question? 6 seals, a single culture. Eridu, the city founded 1,500 years before the Sumerians, the place where their kingdom descended. 18 layers of temples, at the same point, on the same axis, with the same sacredness. Reptilian-faced figurines, a people repeating the same face in the same detail for 1,500 years. A tradition that museums cover up with stylized labels, a tradition they cannot explain. Knowledge from the Sea, Oan Una Apkalu, a memoir told in 3 different languages in Mesopotamia for 5,000 years, but rooted in Ubaid. Open sea sailors, people who sailed 4,000 years before Egypt, crossed the Persian Gulf, reached Bahrain, and invented bitumen as ship tar. The geometry of the 3 temples, the shrines serving an unseen center on Tepe Gavratta, the complex whose memory was erased after its destruction, with ordinary structures built upon it. Long skulls, some taped, some claimed to be natural. The dead looted in war, their numbers dwindling. A people whose name doesn't appear at the top of the Sumerian king list, but who pointed from place to place at the beginning of everything. All of this connects to a single point. Who were the Ubaidians? Official history says they were a local people. They gradually developed in the swamps of Mesopotamia and transformed into the Sumerians. Perhaps a normal cultural evolution. But the Ubaidians did not abandon their own writing. We don't know their language. We don't know their faces. Those who came later acted as if the Sumerians had forgotten them. But they inherited everything from them. The temple, the city, the ship, the geometry, the idea of holiness, even their gods. And in a small place within their own myths, they whispered softly, "Someone from the sea taught us these things." The Sumerians didn't imagine this. They remembered. But we have forgotten whom they remembered. We've seen a bit of what lies beneath Eridu, but if we venture much further south, from the southern swamps of Mesopotamia to the waters of the Persian Gulf, we'll uncover something even older. Sonar images indicate regular structural traces on the Gulf seabed, flat walls, angular platforms, canals. These may have been built around 12,000 BC, at the end of the Ice Age, in an area that was still land before the Gulf was submerged. On our next journey, we'll descend into this submerged kingdom, a city sleeping on the seabed of the Persian Gulf, possibly 5,000 years older than Eridu. Of what you've seen so far, which one disturbed you the most? Write in the comments. Which seal made you think the most? 18 layers of Eridu? Reptile-faced figurines? Long skull dead? If you like it, hit the like button, subscribe, and don't miss the next trip. We're waiting. Eridu is still standing, Bahrain is still there, and there's another kingdom submerged underwater. Yeah.